the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
A good old CFL shootout. Now that the Elks have tasted victory, are they hungry for more? Was it an Alouettes comeback or a Redblacks collapse? Plus, who is the best backup QB in the Canadian Football League? These items and more will be examined from all angles next on the CFL This Week. From the Ticats Audio Network, I'm Bubba O'Neil. Folks, if you are a regular, thanks for joining us. And if you're new, you're certainly locked into the CFL's best podcast that brings together the top analysts, columnists, and broadcasters from all over our fine country. Let's open our floor to this week's trio of co-hosts. Hey, if you know all about the Ottawa Rough Riders, the Renegades, and the Redblacks, if it has any meaning to you, he's seen it from the field and from TSN 1200's broadcast booth. Thanks for joining us, Jeff Avery.
Bubba, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure there. Hey, I'm about to guarantee a statement. There may be no more happier or pleased or impressed broadcaster, at least from a play-by-play standpoint, from all over our country, ending that 13-game losing slump. When's the date that you tasted victory there, Mr. Morley Scott?
The last time we saw a win was in September of last year in Saskatchewan against the Rough Riders. So, 13 long games later, it was nice to get a win again in Hamilton last week.
Yes, and folks, you can sound that rookie alert. Ding, ding, ding. In addition to the Stampeders, he has the Calgary sports scene covered. And for doing it for TSN. Great to have you for the first time there, Salim, Valji.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to chat about a team that is in a little bit different of a spot than they're used to, and I'm privileged that you had me on board here.
Yeah, this is great to have you. Folks, let's get right to work. Hey, I don't know how you all felt, but I've had this euphoria feeling after the Riders and Lions game. It reminded me of how good the CFL can actually be. Morley, did you feel the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very entertaining, fun to watch. It was points where maybe you wanted to leave it and say this one's over, but Lions made the big comeback to get it close in the fourth quarter. Very entertaining football game. It's what the CFL is all about, and we've seen a few of those this year. There's been a lot of games that have been very close games this year, very entertaining games this year, and it's been a pretty good season for watching football, I think, and I believe the TV ratings are starting to show that as well, with them seeming to be ticking upward week after week.
Jeff, did you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Especially, I love the final few minutes of the CFL game. It just allows for so much more to happen. A lot of people talk about the great coverage, the great competition, and down south of the border, but I don't think there's anything like the last couple of minutes of a CFL game when things are rolling in either direction because teams go back and forth. You don't know how many points can go on the board in those last 2 or 3 minutes.
Salim, that was sort of the way I kind of felt. I thought there was really no way the BC Lions were going to come back and even make it a ball game. But then I had to knock on my head. It's like, what league are you watching? This is the CFL where the last 3 minutes, anything can happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I know some of the rule changes for younger people or in the States kind of catch people off guard. But 3 downs, the way the game is set up, it is akin to, it sets itself up well for different comebacks and things like that. Even the Redblacks a few weeks ago versus Winnipeg, it's such an entertaining game and you really cannot turn the TV off. And I'm sure that's a big reason why ratings have been what they've been this season and why Canadians, I think, really love this game.
Morley, be honest. I mean, Jake Dolegala, did he surprise you?
I think so, because I hadn't seen much of him. I really didn't have much of an expectation for him because we really hadn't seen him a lot. He played a little bit last year. This was his first start this year. He gets his first win. The thing that jumps out right away is his size. He's just so big. But he didn't have great numbers, but he got a win. And, that's the key. I think he managed the football game well. 3 touchdown passes. His receivers made some good catches. Man, his receivers really bailed him out a few times. But, for a guy who's third on the depth chart, really, to come in and win a game like that, that's pretty impressive.
And Jeffrey, on the flip side, it's that same old question. Now, even though he did rally this team, just it goes to show you sometimes, and we talk about it all the time on the Ticats Audio Network, win or lose, turnovers are so critical.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a momentum swing at times. It's a momentum starter at times, and at times it's game killers. You can't turn the ball over. And I think if you look at we're seeing it from a young guy here in Ottawa, and Dustin Crum, where in his first 2 games he had 3 interceptions. He's a smart kid. He understands the importance of these things. And in the last 4 previous to this last game, he had 1 interception. So the importance of turnovers is not lost on both, obviously, ourselves, the fans, and, of course, the players involved. And so, yeah, it can be really, truly game-changing.
And the best part about it, Salim, to me, is that a game like that, we don't want to question coaches, but we sometimes end up doing so. There's always those couple of decisions that are made by the coaches that are open for criticism. I know you can't, it's hard to do during the game, but after the fact, that's where people like us like to rip up the coaches a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And even stuff like time management or clock management or things like that. Like, by all accounts, Dolegala did have a pretty good training camp, right? And I read some commentary as Saskatchewan that should he be the guy that instead of Mason Fine there initially. And it's tricky, like even seeing over here with Dave Dickinson now wearing both hats, just how tough it is for these coaches, how much they have to manage, how much is on their plate. And just, with a young developing quarterback in Jake Mayer over here, just how little time they actually have to all these essential functions. I mean, it gives us plenty of room to talk and have podcasts and things like that and fill up airtime. But it really is kind of crazy how much these coaches have to figure out. And it's exciting for the league, I think, when you have these upsets where Saskatchewan goes in, they don't really have a chance based on bookmakers or whatever, and they really pull it off, and it makes the league that much tighter. But I mean, it gives us, like we've talked about Craig Dickinson a lot over the years with certain play calls and things like that and quarterback decisions. But I mean, it's a lot tougher for those guys, and I'm sure most fans realize, but it gives us plenty to chat about too. So it's a win-win, I guess.
Jeffrey, last one to you here. 5-5. The Riders, I mean, I kind of wondering where this is coming from.
Yeah, well, at times they look really very good. I mean, they obviously have a lot of talent, a lot of positions on that team, and we've seen them. But at times they're just so inconsistent, and that's always an issue. I think we see it in too many teams across the league, and obviously the ones with the losing records, and Ottawa is no exception. Montreal has had their moments, but have now got themselves more consistent, if you will. And Saskatchewan is now starting to show us that, they can play that consistent football. But it's always the question, will it continue? I chuckle all the time at these power rankings. Well, the power rankings are up until the start of the next game, because you don't know who's showing up with probably 50% of this league.
All right. I'll start with you, Morley. The 13-game losing slump, as we talked about right off the top, it's over. And I thought the Elks laid down some tracks, we'll say, with the loss to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and they come in there and they capitalize with a win in Hamilton. There are some people now wondering, okay, they've got the monkey off their back, but then there's also some that are saying, hey, this is the foundation for maybe a little run. Do you believe this could be the situation with the Edmonton Elks?
Yeah, I do. I think they're set up pretty well right now. And you go back to that Winnipeg game, like you mentioned, Bubba, and I had Trey Ford on the Elks This Week last night, our show here on 630 CHED, and I asked him that same question, and he said, yeah, we got a lot of belief from that game. They were up 22-0 on what most people call the best team in the Canadian Football League right now, and they were taking it to them. They were in complete control of the game, and weren't able to finish it. That's been part of their problem all season long, as they haven't been able to play the second half as well as they played the first half. So that was a big building block for them. Then they move in to play Hamilton. Obviously, they're not the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I thought the Elks were pretty much in control of that game from start to finish. They had a little hiccup in the third quarter, but they were able to reel it back in and take control of it. So, yeah, it's a building block for sure, that game. And now they're set up moving forward, because if they're going to make the playoffs, and I know it's ridiculous to say halfway through the season with one win that you got a chance to make the playoffs, but they do. I mean, they're going to have to catch Hamilton, Ottawa, and Calgary. All three of those teams have 3 wins. The Elks beat Hamilton last week. They play Ottawa this week, and then they got back-to-backs with Calgary. So they can get back into the race. As we kind of said on our post-game show on Thursday night, they've put themselves in a position to maybe make some noise. So they're not quite there yet. They've got to do a lot of work, and they got some work ahead of them. But at least they've got to win. And to a man, through this whole awful stretch this season, they've been positive, and they said, we just need one win. Once we get one win, we're going to turn it around and play much better. So we'll see if that carries over on into Sunday night when they play the Redblacks.
Jeff, that has to be a fear for the Redblacks right now, that this team, they have confidence now.
I don't think there's any question. I agree with everything Morley just said. I personally had talked about, I thought this was an opportunity for the Elks to win their first game. I didn't think there was any question that they were going to go into Hamilton and really come out with a victory. I thought that was on board for them. And yeah, building that momentum is so important. And it's funny, a gentleman on the morning radio show here in TSN 1200, JR, said, in the back of every Redblacks football fan's mind is the thought that they are going to be the team that allows the Elks to break that home losing record. So whether you're going to think about a win or a loss, that's the first thing that comes to mind is, here we are going to Edmonton. They're going to allow them to get that first win. And it's entirely possible. These are two teams that have their issues, but both have a lot of talent, key positions. So I think it's going to be a great game this weekend.
You know, Salim, it's not too long away the Labor Day doubleheader, and the Stamps have to be concerned as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think, there's a lot of talk about what's going on at Edmonton, but Calgary hasn't been all that much better. Jake Maier has had such a rough transition in his second year, first year is sort of the number one guy here. And the offenses, if you look at them, they're not all that different. And I think Stamps fans really have the right to be concerned over here that those two Labor Day games, should Edmonton win versus Ottawa, and they've got a really good chance at it, they'll only be one back if the Stamps, and Calgary plays in Toronto. Toronto's, I think, coming off a bye week. That'll be in Toronto on Friday, I think. And there's concern over here in Calgary. And if you go into those Labor Day games with an Edmonton team that's suddenly got a streak, that's gotten a couple of really big monkeys off their back, it's tough, right? Calgary has not looked all that great this season. They haven't won consecutive games. I think off the field, the organization is taking a little bit of a dive in their brand. So it'll be fascinating, those two games, if, as we all anticipate, Toronto does win versus Calgary and Edmonton does get that streak over with finally. Those two games might end up being really, really intriguing in this league, because all of a sudden Edmonton's coming and Calgary might find themselves in the unfamiliar place of last in the West, should it ultimately not go their way in the coming weeks.
Morley, what was the reaction with the fan base and the sort of community in Edmonton after the win?
Pretty relieved, obviously. I think they'll be more relieved. I think the original phrase would be, yeah, but can they win at home? And I think that's what everybody's waiting for. I think the first win at home, whenever it comes, will be more of a relief to everybody and to the organization especially as well. But yeah, I think people are pretty happy. They're especially happy that Trey Ford's getting the opportunity to play, because the fans have been calling for him and criticizing Chris Jones a little bit for holding him out. And I maybe take the opposite look and say maybe it was a good move by Chris Jones to hold him out until he's ready to play, and then he felt he was ready to play, put him in, and he's had two pretty good games so far. Numbers aren't fantastic, but he's had two pretty good games, and he's got a win, and he's held on to the football last week, and the offense looks totally different with him in at quarterback and Jarius Jackson calling the plays. They're doing a lot of different things. So, everybody's relieved here, but they know it's a long road and a deep hole that they're in, so they're kind of still in the show me state, where it's, okay, you won one, but let's see you end the home streak first before I get too excited.
Jeff, you're obviously analyzing that offense and defense of the Elks, and no doubt, the hashtag free Trey Ford hashtag was all over the place, but now it's actually there. When you look at this young quarterback, and I know you've seen many, whether it be the scrambling type or the drop back type, you've seen a lot of quarterbacks in your time. What do you like or dislike about this young up-and-comer?
I don't think there's much to dislike about Trey Ford. Athletically, obviously, he's off the charts in his abilities. He also seems to have, for a young kid, he seems to have a good head on his shoulders, and you see it from a few players when they come into this league, and we're actually seeing one very similar in Ottawa in Dustin Crum, and before him the injured Tyree Adams, a couple of young quarterbacks that they looked comfortable in the pocket, they looked comfortable running the offense, they looked comfortable in the huddle, and I think I see all those same characteristics in Trey Ford. His citizenship is irrelevant. I mean, he's just a quality athlete who can play the position. And I think the more time he gets under center, there are going to be hiccups. There are going to be problems. There's going to be times when he's not going to look as good as he perhaps should or has. And we see that as well here in Ottawa with our quarterbacks. But you understand that if the arrow is pointing up, and we've seen that I think it's going to continue to point up, and these kids will continue to improve with the more snaps they get under their belt. And that's where these, we're gone through an era here where we've gone some outstanding quarterbacks, some Hall of Fame quarterbacks playing in this league, and then we've got through a point in time where we're seeing maybe questionable talent at that position or not as deep talent. It's just a great thing for the league to see these young kids come into the league and have success on the field. So hopefully for most of them, or some of them, that will continue.
And Salim, the thing I like about Trey is that he has had opportunities probably to be on the field. He's probably had opportunities maybe with other teams, maybe even another league, if he changed his position. But he has been pretty steadfast in saying, I'm a quarterback and I'm going to play quarterback.
Sorry, what's the question? Do you think he
just the fact that he has stayed steadfast in saying that I'm going to be a quarterback, and instead of going on the field and being on special teams, well, now it's actually happening for him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's sometimes cliche to say, a kid sees the player on TV and says, oh, I want to be like that. But, not only is the fact that he's Canadian, like Nathan Rourke, but the fact that he developed at U Sports is really, really intriguing too, right? And how many of those quarterbacks have come into this league and won in the past 50 years? I think it's only a handful. So I applaud him. I imagine, to reach your dream and a couple of coaches telling you, you might have to play receiver, you might have to be on special teams, Ford being steadfast in that confidence, in that belief in himself. And he went to Waterloo too, which isn't, UBC. It's not one of the bigger schools that invest a ton in its football program. So it's awesome to see that. I think the league needs more of those types of stories as they look to promote their product to Canadians. And if you tell a college kid in Calgary that goes to UFC the Dinos games that the quarterback here might be the next quarterback of the Calgary Stampeders, I think that's a really strong selling point. And as they look to grow the game, I would hope that Trey Ford continues his ascent and the league recognizes that and makes him a pillar in their marketing, because he touches so many bases. And the fact that he's had this unwavering belief in himself and has not wavered from that is just further testament that he has earned the right to be here, and hopefully he's here for a long time.
The week had, I guess, no less than two outstanding finishes, and another one was in the nation's capital, where the Alouettes came back and again proving in the Canadian Football League in the last 3 minutes anything can happen, and they pull off a nice comeback and defeat the Redblacks in what was a big, tough Eastern Division game. Jeff, you called the game. Credit to the Alouettes for the comeback, or did the Redblacks get a little conservative down the stretch and sort of invite that situation to happen to them?
Well, in a couple of instances, yes, I'd agree with that, Bubba, that there were a couple of spots where you saw the coverage in the secondary soft, and Montreal took advantage of that, getting the ball in the hands of the receivers underneath, and were able to convert those into first downs. And you don't want to not give credit to Montreal. Certainly they did what they had to do. But when you're going to have breakdowns in the secondary that continues to occur here in Ottawa, where you have receivers running 10 and 15 yards from the nearest defender, that just can't happen. And that is always right on the shoulders of the Redblacks. And until they clean that up, you can't go in this week against a team with the talented receiving core that the Edmonton Elks have and expect to have any opportunity of winning a game unless you can keep coverage at least within reasonable distances on the receivers. And you don't see that anywhere else in any other team in this league, where receivers run wide open due to continual mental breakdowns. That has to stop.
Salim, did you see this happening when you watched this contest?
A little bit, yeah. And it kind of reminded me, Bubba, of the game here between the Redblacks and the Stampeers a few weeks ago. It was a shootout. Jake Mayer had by far his best game. But you see, and one reporter joked to me that, like, it was Danny Austin that joked to me, like, either him or I could beat the Iowa secondary, because I was raving about Mark and Michelle and his long catch there. But, there are challenges there, right? And like Jeff alluded to, like giving a receiver, especially with the waggle, I'm surprised that you're giving a receiver that much cushion. I understand different schemes at times with zone versus man, but this Iowa Redblacks defense really, really does make it hard on the offense, because they're so prone to big plays. They're so prone to those momentum shifting plays. And I think the Redblacks are similar to the Stamps in that a handful of plays throughout the season, maybe 5 to 7 plays, and the Stampeers and the Redblacks might be 1-1 in their respective divisions, but it's these mental mistakes that both these teams are really prone to make that have resulted in them kind of being middle of the pack or in that ballpark. And for the Redblacks, it's about eliminating those explosive plays that generate momentum for the other team, and it really is about clamping down on coverage, because teams are taking advantage of that. And Edmonton, for all their faults roster construction-wise, they've got a good quarterback now, and they've got some really, really talented receivers. Steven Dunbar's woken up a little bit. Like, obviously, Geno Lewis is Geno Lewis. So, you see that, and I think the Redblacks have to be worried that their defense, just scheme-wise, personnel-wise, they're not preventing those big plays, and teams are taking advantage.
Morley, we got so used to the crumb back, it was in reverse.
Yeah, indeed. It was that's the exact same thing. I'm watching the game, and I was actually listening. I was camping on the weekend, and I was listening to AJ and Jeff call the game. Then I watched the game yesterday, and I just could not believe how open the receivers were, especially on that on the opening on the pass that set up the winning touchdown in the last minute. How do you let a guy get that free at that time of the game with the game on the line? And it clearly wasn't the first time it happened in the game. And they just when they needed to move the football, Montreal moved the football, and they didn't seem to have much resistance from the Redblacks defense.
Jeffrey, I understand that and we talk about Morley and the fan base and what he's had to endure for a little over a season. What's the fan base thinking right there after a loss like that? I can't believe it was too good.
Yeah, the call-in shows on the broadcast have been pretty critical. Obviously, talking about players making these mistakes, because that has been the response from the coaching staff, that there have been mental errors, and it hasn't been singled out on any one individual. There's been a series of them. So there's been people talking about, well, if you continue to make those errors, then personnel changes should be made. There's been criticism of the coaching staff, the head coach, and some of his decisions. Obviously, Bob Dice is an extremely experienced coach in the CFL positionally, and a coordinator's position. Head coach, not so much, but that's his job, and he's got to live, with his decisions, which he's done. He sticks up for his decisions, and that's the way he works forward. But that has been probably a focal point, if you will, from the call-ins that they're talking about, decisions by the head coach and personnel.
That's a tough one, right? Like, because you see the story behind a guy like Bob Dice and the fact that he deserves this shot, but there have been times and a couple of games this year where the head coach, and I guess this kind of goes for all coaches across the league, where you're going to be questioned and you've got to be steadfast in your thinking.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, easier said than done. I just listened to a podcast, and one of the comments was about how public opinion can sometimes sway private decisions. And we've all got access to social media now, right? And I think that's something you really, that mental kind of stamina to go with your gut or go with your process in the face of all of that is a lot tougher. And I kind of point to and like Dickinson's talked about this a lot, just how much is on a head coach's plate, let alone someone that's coordinating special teams and the head coach or being the GM. And, I don't think we realize in the media just how 24/7, 365 those jobs are. And Bob Dice, like, that's such an incredible story. A guy that persevered, waited for his opportunity, clearly did a great job in the interim role last season, clearly had buy-in from the players. And for him to, lose his starting quarterback in a heartbreaking kind of manner to start the season, well, Dave Dickinson might be one of the best coaches in the league, but could he have survived if Bo Levi had the injuries of, say, Jeremiah Masoli? It really does come down to quarterbacks in football a lot of the time, and I don't think you can blame Bob Dice for that. I think defensively and scheme-wise, like we talked about, there are perhaps things you can talk to him about, or even Dustin Crum, and is he as pure a pocket passer as you'd like? And maybe that goes into personnel and how you find players. I know there's a quarterback shortage a little bit in the league right now, but you have to commend Dice. He's persevered. I think in any spot, it's got to be tough to be a minority coach in these leagues as well. And he's done that, and he's been a great ambassador. And clearly the players, based on the videos, love playing for him. But you have to, this is a results-driven business. I think Farhan put up a tweet the other day of who would make the playoffs with the Hamilton, Ottawa, or Calgary. I voted for Ottawa. I think they've got enough pieces there and enough kind of momentum building throughout the season. But it's tough, and I don't think fans kind of realize just how much these coaches have to deal with.
All right, guys, it's funny because we can't help but touch on quarterbacks, and this has been a year unlike any other. I mean, we're talking about Jake Dolegala, who wins a football game for the Rough Riders, and we look at him and we say, oh my goodness, he was the third string quarterback. Jeffrey Avery, I mean, like a same thing with Trey Ford, started out as the third string quarterback, but now the starter. So I'm going to ask all you guys right now, in this year of the injured starting quarterback, who's the CFL's best backup QB?
Well, that's a heck of a question, Bubba. I don't know whether you can come up with an answer. I mean, I would be a homer and say Dustin Crum has illustrated that perhaps he maybe deserves that crown, but he was behind another quarterback who was illustrating a lot of abilities here in Ottawa, in Tyree Adams. And so there's a couple of young guys. You look across the league, and there's a lot of kids and youngsters that playing that position that never get the opportunity. And there's a variety of reasons. And obviously there's bias when you see where they come from, their backgrounds. As Salim mentioned, it's great to see a U Sports guy in Trey Ford get out there and make his, obviously doing what he's doing. So these kids are getting a chance because of injury, and we're actually getting a chance maybe to see them where we never would have seen them before. They never would have seen the field until here in Ottawa. If Masoli stays healthy, well, he plays for another 2 years. Who knows who's A, still on the roster, and B, how have they developed at all, with the limited snaps you get in practice. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of bona fide competitors for that title you just asked for. I don't know how you come up with who's the winner, but I'm going to be a homer and go with Dustin Crum.
Who do you got, Morley?
I'm going to say, because I'll be a homer too, and say because I saw it. I'm not going to say Trey Ford. I think Drew Brown is the guy. I mean, he's the guy who is in, and it hasn't worked out too well for both these guys from Calgary, Nick Arbuckle, and then moving forward, everyone thought he was going to be the next great thing, and then he ends up going out somewhere in free agency, and it just hasn't worked out for him, and now he's a backup in Ottawa to the fourth string guy, right? So it's been a tough ride for him. Jake Mayer, same thing in Calgary. Everyone thought he was the next guy, so the Stampeders get rid of Bo Levi Mitchell, and Mayer really hasn't had a great season this year with a lot of guys in Calgary. So, it's tough, but I think Drew Brown is that next guy, and he's going to have that same kind of heat on him when free agency hits this offseason, and he's going to have an opportunity to go somewhere and maybe become a starter, and we'll see how it plays out for him. But right now, he's the guy I would pick, and I'm just thinking back, I don't think there's any backup quarterbacks who haven't played yet, right? I mean, everybody is sadly had to go to their backup quarterback. I guess Toronto and Calgary hasn't. Mayer started every game in Calgary, so I guess he's been healthy. Toronto, Kelly left a game early but didn't miss a start. But the other teams have been, everybody else has had their starter had to get injured, or they had to make a switch at the starting quarterback spot and bring the backup into play. So everybody's getting a chance. That's the one thing we can say about this year at quarterback. If you can throw the ball, you're getting a chance.
Well, in Salim, I know that Calgary is technically the only one where we really haven't seen. I mean, Stevens comes in and runs his third down plays, but yeah, Jake has been the guy. But boy, it sounds like, according to some of the fans, they'd like to see some of the backup quarterbacks as well too.
Yeah, they would. And I get it, right? But I mean, number one, how many quarterbacks have we seen that take time to get going, right? Like Bo Levi wasn't Bo Levi in his sophomore season. I think where Jake's really trying to figure it out is being a leader of men, and I think he's kind of figuring out how to be the most authentic leader he can be, and that's been a little bit of an adjustment, but he's not been great on the field. I think he's learning that defenses watch a lot of film, like Drew Brown did last week when Brent Monson designed a defense that really kind of stifled Winnipeg's backup quarterback, and Winnipeg only won by a point there versus Calgary. In terms of your initial question, I don't know if Dane Evans would qualify as a backup, but I feel like he would get my vote for best backup quarterback in the league. And I mean, it goes to show just how valuable experience is. I'm willing to bet that if Calgary had another experienced quarterback in the room, especially with Dickinson being the GM now and maybe not having as much time for that position group, I'm willing to bet that that would have helped Mayer in his development a lot. But in terms of backup quarterbacks, if Dane Evans qualifies, I would say him. But they have to figure out how to bring more high quality pivots up here because there is a little bit of a talent drain. And I mean, maybe it's unfortunate luck this season with injury, but we have talked about that in the past with this league needing more high-quality pivots, especially with Bo Levi kind of nearing the end of his career and Masoli's future being up in the air a little bit, unfortunately. So they got to figure out some way to entice the Americans or develop more youth sports talent to make sure that we've always got sort of a healthy cupboard of high-quality signal callers here.
Jeff, you've watched this league, and I said played in this league for many years, and we always do say this. And Morley, I know you probably even say it on your broadcast. This is a league where as teams need to have two quarterbacks. Like it's just always kind of been that way. But Jeff, have you seen anything like this where the depth chart is getting pushed to the limit on so many teams at that position?
No, never. I mean, you're talking a variety of teams getting down to number 3 and number 4. That's, just never seen anything like this. And I think if you go back a couple of decades, the starters did a better job of staying healthy for a variety of reasons. But in the last, 15 years, injuries have really become part of the game at the key position. And it's become even more integral to have that backup quarterback or a third quarterback, or in our case, a fourth quarterback on the roster that you actually can have some faith in. But it always comes down to, with these injuries coming up, how many snaps do these guys get? Very limited in practice. The way practices are run these days, you don't get a lot of work. You're running the other team's offense. You're getting limited work with number ones. And if you do get the opportunity to step in, they always have to have a couple of weeks to just get them familiar to who they're throwing the ball to. The time spent with receiver quarterback is integral in success. And if you don't have that time, it unfortunately happens on the field far too often, where you see the pluses, the minuses, the careers end or the careers keep going. And boy, it's this year has just been off the charts in that position as far as injuries are concerned.
Morley, have you seen anything like this?
I think back to 2015, and I remember the Elks opened up that season playing a game in Fort McMurray against the Toronto Argonauts, and Mike Riley suffered a pretty bad knee injury in that game. And then after that game, we were watching the Riders play their game that night, and Darian Durant tore his Achilles in that game. And I think there was 2 or 3 other starters who got injured in the first month of the season. And that's I can't remember exactly who it was, but I remember it was a season where a lot of starting quarterbacks got hurt. And absolutely, you got to have at least 2 now, because you got to have one who's your starter, one who can fill in, and one who can run short yardage, really, when you think about it, and then you're set. But it's been tough. I mean, Ottawa started 4, Edmonton started 3, I think Hamilton started 3. That's pretty rare when you get that deep into the league with teams starting 3 and 4 quarterbacks in one season.
Salim, the thing that kind of makes me scratch my head is that here we are in 2023, and don't we have the best training facilities and the best training methods and the diets and the workouts, yet this is happening? It seems strange to me.
Yeah,
do we need to change the rules? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. Did you hear what Zach Collaros said yesterday? He returned to practice in Winnipeg, and he was asked about the hit from the Elks' Coney Ely that put him out for, I guess, a game and a half, game and 3/4. And he didn't think. He said there was nothing malicious about the hit, but he said something could have been called, and then he kind of made a comment about the CFL doesn't seem to really care about protecting the quarterbacks anyway, something along those lines. And maybe the league's got to step up and provide better protection for the quarterback, so we don't get in a situation where we're seeing 3 and 4 quarterbacks deep on the depth chart for some teams.
Salim, maybe ride with that. I mean, is that an issue, you think?
Yeah, it is, and I think Morley nailed it, right? Like having these quarterbacks kind of be outspoken. I think Bo Levi's is more of a fluke play, I guess both times. But and I'm not sure what the solution would be. Whether it's already so tough for defensive linemen as it is, given the rules regarding where hand placement can be and things like that. And a lot of these rules are good, but the reality is that these quarterbacks generate like it's the most important position for a reason, right? It's what fans gravitate towards, and at the same time, though, how much of the onus is on the team to develop these quarterbacks? Like, I'm at Stamps practice every day, and I don't see Tommy Stevens running first team offense a ton. Like, he's probably the best short yardage quarterback in the league, but how many times have I seen him really get a lot of reps with Reggie Begelton and the full offensive line and Mark and Michelle? It really isn't a whole lot. And like when you alluded to, like, practice time is limited, but how much of it is on the teams to develop these quarterbacks and put them in spots to succeed? So I think the rule changes are one thing, but it's also a team responsibility as well, where, we all know that Jake Maier is going to start the rest of the season over here. The guy just not had a great season, but does he need 100% of the first team reps right now? God forbid he goes down. Well, does Tommy Stevens have the training to come in and run Calgary's offense where Tommy Stevens has to throw the ball? He can't rely on his legs. I'm not sure he does. And that's where I think the teams have to figure out innovative ways to make sure that these second and third string quarterbacks get their opportunities. And in terms of short yardage, I wonder if there's play calling things as well. And I just saw this right now, but direct snaps to running backs on third and shorts or second and shorts, like stuff like that, which puts the quarterback in a less risky position. I wonder if teams have to get more creative, because the quarterbacks, it's a driver financially for the league, and the more that go down, it's going to hurt everyone. And I think Kolaris had a great point, as did Morley, but teams have to get creative, and teams have to figure out how to develop these players so that, it's just not on the league, it's on the teams themselves.
Jeff, last one to you on this. Are the quarterbacks protected well enough, or does this have to be an increased focus?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of ways, I guess, but I think they are. The rules as they stand now generally are very protective of the quarterbacks. I mean, you can't hit them. You can't brush a hand by the face mask, by the helmet. You can't contact in the head. You can't hit below the waist. As Salim said, I just find it so difficult thinking of the defensive players as they are, fighting upfield against a 300-pounder, trying to get free to make a play on a quarterback, and then you expect to have perfect body control like you're a figure skater and be able to know exactly where you're going to make contact, how you're going to come down, what you're going to do as we're losing balance. And you see so many of these things that really the defensive player can do nothing about. But the league has put these rules in effect to protect the quarterback, and they're doing it as best they can. And heck, some of these quarterbacks we're seeing much more mobility. And again, I look at Trey Ford, I look at Dustin Crum, I look at Tyree Adams. These kids get out and run, and they escape the pocket and get themselves exposed to bigger hits as well. Now, they keep bouncing up so far, but as we all know, and we've watched this league for a long time, that only goes so far. It will catch up with you, the punishment you take when you leave the pocket.
Morley, I have to ask you that because Jeff brings up a great point, that so many of these quarterbacks are not the Jake Dolagallas that he's just going to stand in there, 6'7" or whatever he is, stand in the pocket and throw. A lot of these guys want to run. So when they do run, should they be valued like a running back?
Yeah, that's the question, because it's tough. You don't want them to get hurt, but you just can't let them run where they want to run without taking them down, right? It's still tackle football. It's still professional football. You still got to be able to give a hit, and you still got to be able to take a hit. But I think outside the pocket is the big question, and really, I think when you think about it, that's probably where most guys get hurt. I mean, when they're out running and they get twisted when they go down or they get hit hard while they're in motion. I mean, the hit that Crum took on the touchdown he scored in the fourth quarter, man, that was a thunderous hit. Yes. And I mean, you can't. I mean, there was no penalty on the play, and it was a legal hit, but I mean, those got to add up after a while when you keep taking those hits, and you can't say when he's out of the pocket, you can't hit him still, you still have to make the tackle, right? Because he's not slowing down for you. He's trying to get to the end zone, and you can't give an advantage by saying you can't tackle him, right? So, yeah, it's something that the CFL is going to have to wrestle with, and I don't envy them because it's going to be difficult.
That hit really was hellacious. Like, I mean, it's a good thing he had two offensive linemen to just guide him to the sidelines after that hit. Man, that was something else. He's one tough kid. I will continue to say that, especially seeing him twice from a Tiger Cat standpoint. Guys, I got real vintage, and I'm Salim, I think you're probably the youngest of all of us, so excuse me if you don't even register here.
I have an old soul, so...
But here I am on YouTube, and I just was going through some old, you watch something and then it leads to another thing on YouTube. And I got caught up in an Argonauts and Rough Riders game on what would have been, I'm presuming, CTV. And it had the likes of Pat Marsden on the call, along with Leif Pettersson. And boy, those guys as a broadcast duo, they were humming. Like, they just sounded so good and called a real good game. And it was in Toronto, where there was 48,000 people at Exhibition Stadium. Anyway, I'm going on and on. I loved the call. So I'll throw it to you, Jeff. You've been in the business a long time. When you think back of the great play-by-play, or whether it be a color announcer as well to analyst, who's your favorite?
Oh, wow. Favorite.
At least someone that just, you puts a smile on your face at the very least.
Well, I first of all...
And it could be new or old. It could be new or old.
Your choice of Leif Pettersson. I played against Leif, and I always enjoyed his commentary when he was doing the broadcast as a color guy. I thought he was outstanding. One guy here in Ottawa that just always brought smiles to my face was the play-by-play guy, Ernie Calcutt. And, he was just to the point all the time, critical when criticism needed to be made. He wasn't shy about it. A big figure here in the city, but I always thought, boy, when I was growing up, listening to Ernie Calcutt was really something.
Morley?
Well, for me, television-wise, it's Don Whitman. He was the guy that I kind of first associate watching the CFL with a lot. Don Whitman was so great. More recently, Chris Cuthbert. Always enjoyed listening to Chris Cuthbert, and really miss him. He's been doing hockey now for the last couple of 3 years, so I miss him doing games on radio. For me, it's Bob Irving. I spent when I was young, I spent a couple of years living in Winnipeg, and I loved listening to Bob Irving. And listening to him is probably one of the reasons I do what I do now, because I enjoy listening to him so much. So those three for me, but in particularly Bob Irving, who kind of was the first guy who I heard call football, and I said, yeah, I kind of want to be like that.
Yeah, Whitman was spectacular with the orange CBC jackets, and he had the little general on his side there, Ronnie Lancaster. Yep. Boy, again, to the point. Honest broadcasting, like criticize when needed to be, pat on the back when obviously the play deserves so. Those guys were outstanding, and boy, they covered a lot of games over back in the day. Salim, who's your guy?
I grew up in Edmonton, so I guess Rod Phillips would have to be number one, just from a bigger picture perspective. In terms of CFL, I think it was Mark Lee that did a lot of CBC CFL stuff back in the day. And I remember growing up, and like family reunions for us in Edmonton would get paused when the Labor Day Classic was on, because we happened to have family gatherings around that time. And just hearing him on those calls was really iconic. And I think you kind of separate it into sort of the classics and the people that are doing it right now. And I think all the TSN people are number one. I love Dustin Nielsen. I love how he kind of has that classic element, but his calls can go viral just because he's just so enthusiastic and like, what is happening? And that stuff really plays well to today's crowd. So I'd say probably like Rod Phillips, Mark Lee, and then in 2023 for the broadcasters, Dustin Nielsen would have to be number one for me.
Yeah, Mark Lee with the big man by his side. I mean, that was they were Walby, him, like they were crushing it. I mean, and I'm going way too far here probably, but I do miss the fact that CBC doesn't do the games as well too. And I know TSN do a wonderful job too. But I thought it was great to have more. There's no reason why we can't have more, right? So, but yeah, Mark Lee, a classic guy. We've been very, very fortunate here in Hamilton on CHCH. He has done games with us on the university level and still doing the Vanier Cup to this day as well too. So great to have a guy like Mark Lee still involved in the game. Morley, it's funny you bring up Bob Irving. Are you surprised that he's so active on social media?
No, he's always was outspoken, and he's in I think for him it's kind of a different situation now because he's sitting in the big comfy chair. He's got his feet up on the footstool, and he's watching the game, and he's just like a fan now. And I think different things get him upset or get him going a little bit more than he did when he was actually working the game. So yeah, no, I'm not, and he's kind of always been like that, and he's always said some things that get people talking. The neat thing I always liked about Bob is he'll throw something out there and everybody will get upset about it, and then he's gone. He's not in the conversation anymore. Everybody else is chiming in and chirping him and everything, but Bob's out. He's just watching. He's off having a glass of wine somewhere after that, right?
he's a classic, boy, and certainly missed in the Canadian Football League. And Salim, to your point there, Dustin Nielsen really is something else. There may be no broadcaster that I've ever heard, at least in Canadian Football League, that can get out as many words in one breath. like it's but yet, most of us, by the time we get to a certain point, we can't say another word. But he just seems to get it all in that last breath, and like whether his voice is cracking or not. And I can't be critical of someone that is certainly seemingly as passionate about a particular play and a game as certainly he has been. And he's outstanding. What a find for TSN.
Yeah, exactly, Bubba. And I think at times, and you all would know this more than me, but you're sort of told to keep it between 4 and 6. Don't get too high, don't get too low on your calls. And Dustin Nielsen, like he doesn't abide by that, and that's the beauty of his calls, right? Like there's a reason why TSN shows his calls so often on SportsCenter, because he, and I can see how if you're a casual fan, like you see yourself in Dustin, because he grew up in Edmonton. He called UFA Golden Bears for a super long time before getting his shot, so he paid his dues, and TSN scouted him, and he's got that kind of story that you really love to see. And on top of that, he hasn't, sometimes we get a little too professional or a little too kind of we forget what it's like to be the kid that is 7 years old and watching these athletes for the first time. And whenever I hear Dustin's calls, I feel like I see a little bit of that kid that's in him, and it's great to see. And he's being unapologetically himself, and that's the beauty of his calls. So he's done a phenomenal job, and he's had a tough spot to work with because he's had a lot of Elks games and they haven't done great. So he's had to, be that much more not a salesperson, but he's had to bring the product that much more glamour when maybe at times it was tricky to do. So Dustin, he's been a great find, and he grinded a lot to get to this point. And, you see that 7-year-old kid in him, and that's the best part about his calls, I think.
There is no mistaking his passion, and to step in for a guy like Chris. I mean, basically step in and replace a legend. He's done a great job. I love listening to him.
He's probably learned a lot from Morley. He's probably, clearly.
I think he's okay on his own. I think he's okay. He is. I love the passion, and what he does, I think, differently from a lot of the other TV. He brings kind of a radio call to the TV broadcast, and that's where that excitement comes. Mm-hmm. And that's what I like, because I enjoy a radio call, any sport, more than a television call, because it's just more words, it's more passion, it's more excitement, and he brings that to the TV broadcast, which I really like.
All right, guys, let's end up on this. Morley, right to you here. Our game of the week is, let's list them out here, the Owls at Bombers, Stamps at Argonauts, Tiger Cats at Lions, and the Redblacks at Elks. Your game of the week is, I think I know.
I'm going to go with the one I'm getting paid to watch. So yeah, I think that game can do a lot of things, because it's going to be, if the Elks win, it's going to be a huge story because they break the 3 or 4 year old losing streak at home. But it also tightens up the race so much for the final playoff spot, whether it be by the crossover or whatever. So to me, that's the most interesting game. Obviously, I'm a bit of a homer in that aspect, but I think if the Elks can win it, it's going to be the story of the weekend.
Jeffrey, you can be a homer too.
No, I agree with what Morley's saying. I think it obviously has a lot of ramifications. I also think it's the closest matched game of the 4. So I think it's just going to be the most. I think it should be have an opportunity to be the most entertaining game as far as competition. And we talk about Crumback and the Elks obviously getting things done now. So I think it should be a close one till the end and very entertaining game to watch.
I wonder what the CFL record is for most yards run combined by quarterbacks in games, because I don't know what it is, but we might see it on Sunday with these two quarterbacks.
Ooh, you've got a project for all of us. That's a good one there. That's fantastic. Salim, your game of the week is?
I'm going to go clean sweep. I agree with both Jeff and Morley. I think it can be franchise altering. If they win, I really think it can alter the course of a franchise. A really, really unfortunate narrative gets burnt to rest. They let go of Victor Cui a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, and they've just undergone this transformation off the field. And if you can put that to rest, the losing streak that ends last week, the home losing streak, I think it'll do so much for so many fans that feel a little bit disconnected from the team right now and just desperately want to go back to Commonwealth and think that the team has a shot at winning. Like, I don't think it's understating it to say that it could be a franchise. Whenever they break this streak, it'll be franchise altering, and it'll be sort of a renaissance, if you will. And I mean, from our perspective, it means that there could be a battle of Alberta for that final final playoff spots, and that'll lead to interesting questions we have to pose over here in Calgary. So I'll go with those two and say, Edmonton and Ottawa, it has the potential to change so much on and off the field.
Jeff, it's crazy. We haven't even gotten to Labor Day, but you're right. When you look at this matchup, all three of you, whether it's the Ticats, whether it's the Redblacks, whether it's the crossover, we're talking playoffs right now, and a game like this could have some serious implications and maybe someone having an advantage.
Absolutely. And I think both teams are, when you look at their next few games, this is sort of, for Ottawa, it's in the middle of a threesome. Edmonton, obviously, the opportunities coming up. So this game means a lot to both teams for a variety of reasons. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Morley, and again, heck, they got one win, but yeah, it's alive right there for the Elks. It's alive.
So you're saying there's a chance.
It's crazy. And Salim, for the Stampeders, I mean, they've actually, in fact, you have to correct me here, I think they've had some success over the years going to Toronto.
Yeah, I think they have. And when we looked at this 4-game stretch where they were playing Toronto twice and BC, and I forget the other team there. Oh, Winnipeg, obviously. We thought that the game here versus Toronto would be the one that they would win. And I mean, no shocker that teams that basically share coaching staffs with one another in the Argonauts and the Stampeders, there's a few familiar tendencies. I think it's going to be tough, though. I think they have to figure out how to get into the end zone, number one, passing wise especially. And Toronto's defense is just so good. It's such a deep group, and for Calgary, they have to get Jake Mayer going, and they have to get his confidence going, and they have to get him passing the ball into the end zone. Can't rely on the greatest kicker in CFL history forever, right? You have to figure out at some point how to convert drives into touchdowns. So I think it'll be really tough, but it'll be an entertaining game, and I think it'll just be another step in Jake Mayer's development either way. So,
just correct me, is it 3 games without a touchdown?
The last passing touchdown Jake Mayer had, I think, was the Ottawa game. So it might even be 4, if I'm not mistaken. But he has 8 passing touchdowns this season, and 4 of them came versus the Redblacks in that shootout here at McMahon a few weeks ago. So he's got to get going, and I think they need more out of their receivers too. And I know Mark and Michelle maybe could do a little bit more. Beggleton's had a decent season. Traylon Zooks has done well. But, yeah, they have to figure it out on offense one way or the other. So.
Well, you guys have certainly figured it out and put together just a lovely CFL This Week podcast. Your participation, angles, opinions, also so appreciated by guys like myself and obviously our listeners and viewers. So thank you so much for joining us. As we like to do, Salim, when people want to reach out to you and talk about the Stamps and, of course, the Calgary scene and what's coming up with the Flames soon to be, how do people contact you?
You know what? Twitter and Instagram are the only two social media platforms I can handle these days. So, yeah, I mean, I'm on there. At Salim Valji TSN, I think, is the handle for both. And my email's in there, too. I love talking with fans, so feel free to reach out and chat.
Morley?
You can get a hold of me, I still don't want to call it X, but Twitter or X and Instagram, Morley_Scott, and reach out and say hi. I love talking with, especially with CFL fans.
Jeff, can we contact you on social media?
No, thankfully you can't. And
that's the way to go. You figured
You're the smart one, Jeff.
I have to thank the Edmonton Elks for last week's effort because I'm getting together with Eric Upton, Brian Fryer, Tommy Towns, Matt Dunnigan, a bunch of guys from the old Eskimo days. And we're going to have better things to talk about, thankfully, after last
Be some lies told there, I'll bet.
There will be a few, yeah, no doubt.
Well, okay, so if people want to contact Jeffrey, I'm putting it out there, Super AJ on Twitter.
Contact AJ. He'll pass it.
And we'll put it out that way. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And, of course, thank you so much to the listeners and the viewers as well, too. You know where to find us on the Ticats Audio Network with the CFL This Week on your favorite podcast catcher and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We're always on YouTube. We appreciate the like, the subscribe, the 5-star review. We certainly like bringing it to you, and we certainly appreciate when you give us that little nudge of what you'd like us to talk about, and certainly if you're liking the broadcast. And of course, on the Ticats Audio Network, not just the CFL This Week, all kinds of programming. If you love the CFL, and of course, you're the Hamilton Tiger Cats as well. Again, my name's Bubba O'Neil. You've been listening to the CFL This Week. All right, we'll talk to you next week.